Thank you for joining us today for Armchair Historians. I'm your host, Anne-Marie Cannon. Armchair Historians is a Belgian Rabbit production. Stay up to date with us through Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Wherever you listen to your podcast, that is where you'll find us. You can also find us at armchairhistorians.com. Welcome to Armchair Historians, the podcast that asks, what's your favorite history? Okay, so starting something new like a podcast can be pretty messy. There's that whole learning curve, not knowing what I'm doing. Is this really worth it? I've tried to make lemonade out of lemons with the coronavirus lockdown. How I've done that is basically creating quality content in the way of free podcasts. Moving forward, I'd really like to expand on that in order to continue to be able to provide that quality free content. And so I've decided to work with Patreon in developing special tier membership, which will provide patrons with exclusive content that they can only get by becoming a patron. So I invite you to check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/armchairhistorians. That's historians with an S. And I'd like to get your suggestions as to what you would like to receive as exclusive content and rewards for your ongoing support. So take a click on over to our Patreon page, patreon.com/armchairhistorians. Historians is with an S. I'll also post the link in our show notes and on the website. I'd like to be able to continue bringing everybody commercial-free content, and I see Patreon as a potential vehicle for allowing me to do this. And if you can't afford to contribute, that's totally cool. I still hope you'll listen to the podcast. And if you can, I look forward to providing exclusive content, interacting with you on a more personal level, and getting your feedback as to what you would like to see on the show and through your membership. Things that'll add value to your experience of Armchair Historians. Today, we continue our discussion with Kevin Kuharic, the Executive Director of Hotel de Paris Museum. We're talking about the mysterious Frenchman Louis Dupuy, who, according to Mr. Kuharic, was a bit of a germaphobe. Mr. Kuharic reveals early sanitary health practices that Louis Dupuy implemented into the day-to-day running of his world-famous restaurant and hotel, Hotel de Paris. Also, be sure to listen through to the end for our Kids Wisdom segment, where we talk to my great-nephew, who is a great-nephew, 6-year-old Finley, about his favorite and one of his not-so-favorite histories. I'll give you a hint. It has to do with U.S. presidents. Kevin Kuharic serves as the Executive Director of the Hotel de Paris Museum, a site of the National Trust for Historic Preservation. He is writing history and art appreciation books about Oakland Cemetery and Atlanta, Georgia. In addition, Mr. Kuharic has contributed to the books James Novelli, A Forgotten Sculptor, Building Metropolitan Atlanta, Past, Present, and Future, Urban Green, Innovative Parks for Resurgent Cities, Atlanta's Oakland Cemetery, an Illustrated History and Guide, and Cultural Heritage Tourism, 5 Steps for Success and Sustainability. Today we start off with Louis' secret identity being revealed. If you haven't done so already, I suggest you go back and listen to part 1 of the Kevin Kuharic interview.
His secret identity is disclosed the day after he dies in the form of his obituary.
Oh.
So one of the 3 people who knew his secret past was a man by the name of Jesse Randall. Jesse Randall lived here in Georgetown, Colorado. He was the editor of the Georgetown Courier, the local newspaper at the time. And because our Louis Dupuy was a former journalist, Um, they had things in common, so they become friends and confidants. So he shares with Jesse his secret at some point, and then Louis gets sick in August of 1900, and it gets worse instead of better. He contracts pneumonia after 5 weeks of bed rest. And then when he dies, Jesse prints a lengthy obituary in the Georgetown Courier the day after Louis dies. It's the first time he's called the mysterious Frenchman, and all is revealed. It is what I refer to as a warts and all account of Louis's life. It talks about the successes, but it does not shy away from the mistakes and the two identities.
So do
And
you think that that was a betrayal of their friendship, or do you think that was something that Louis approved of or would have approved of?
I really don't know. I would have to speculate on that. What I do know for sure is the result of it did not damage his reputation. It made him famous. So whatever the intent was, the result was that it elevated him to another level as a historic character. Um, it's not very flattering,
And yet it's the truth. And I know, from everything that I've learned from you about Louis is that he was a truth seeker. He didn't swallow dogma whole. He questioned it, but he studied it. Um, so I think, my personal opinion, regardless of why Randall wrote the obituary in the way that he did, that it did him more of a service historically, but also as far as integrity, in the adding value and truth to the narrative of Louis Dupuy in history. That's my thought about that. I don't know. What do you think?
I would agree. Louis was known as a man who thought for himself, and so he would take things into consideration, but then he would make up his own mind and walk his own path. Part of why he finds his greatest success going back to his roots, he really had an entrepreneurial spirit, and he had issues with authority. That's so easy to illustrate. He had issues with the Catholic Church, an authority figure. He had issues with the journalism industry and passed off an article to a superior. So again, trouble with authority. He deserts the U.S. Army, trouble with authority. He disagrees with his editor at the Rocky Mountain News and quits abruptly, trouble with authority. But that trouble stops when he becomes self-employed, when he becomes really the king of his own domain. But he really doesn't pull together all of his personality traits and his experiences until he goes back to his roots, and that's the innkeeping that his parents did not want him to do. So they send him to the seminary for an education that they cannot afford, and they accept that the trade-off is that he becomes a priest. But they wanted him to be educated because they felt that he would have more opportunities in life than innkeeping if he was educated. So,
well, and I think so. What I was getting at is he does end up doing that, but there is this event in his life that, to me, it seems like a reset, and it's the mining accident.
oh, absolutely. That is the moment where he has his final reinvention. So when he's nearly killed.
Did you talk about the accident in depth yet?
No, I can if you'd like.
Yeah, can you tell us about the mining accident and what happens?
Louis Dupuy is working in the high country for the Rocky Mountain News as an itinerant reporter. He's floating between 4 remote mining camps: Breckenridge, Dillon, Silver Plume, and Georgetown, working 2 jobs. reporter covering silver, but he's not gainfully employed as a reporter. And so he needs to fill the gap with another job that makes him some money, and that's cooking. And so he's camp cook and reporter. So this is how he uses both of those skill sets. He makes campfires, he cooks food, he sells those meals to the laborers in the camps. As they're sitting there eating their meals, he then takes the opportunity of that audience to interview these men, and this is how he gets the content for his articles. All right.
Brilliant.
So,
He's brilliant. He's an entrepreneur. He thinks outside of the box. I think you already said that once. Or
so
you,
he's
yeah.
highly intelligent, and so often people who are intelligent can be their own worst enemies, and I think that's the case with Louis Dupuy. So in the 1870s, the editor, William Byers, begins printing articles against Chinese immigrants to the United States. And so this is where Louis Dupuy, as an immigrant himself, but from France, starts to feel a kinship with these other immigrants. So Louis was very proud to be French. He was also proud to be American, and he eventually becomes an American citizen. But I think he feels if this group is criticized and ostracized by the editor, his employer, then maybe that's going to create trouble for Louis. He doesn't feel comfortable with these articles. He's working for the paper, so his name's in there. And so I think he is a person of principle. And this is after the mining accident, or no, before the mining accident. So he's a person of principle already, or becoming one. And so he abruptly quits the paper. And the easiest job for him to get, arguably, would be in mining, because they would be consuming great amounts of labor. It was dangerous work. Men were often being injured and killed, and so they have to replenish that labor pool all the time. So he gets a job with the Coldstream Mine, which is about 2 miles distant from Georgetown in Silver Plume. He was assigned to the Kennedy Tunnel to do hard rock mining, so he's silver mining, and he's using explosives to extract the silver ore. So in March, so he quits the paper in 1872, and in March of 1873, we know he's working for the Coldstream Mine, and there's a terrible mining accident. So he goes into the Kennedy Tunnel with a partner. They place 2 sticks of dynamite on fuses. They leave. They ignite remotely. They hear an explosion, and the assumption is that both shots fired. They're unaware there was a defective fuse. So Louis goes back into the tunnel first. Of course, his coworkers, the other men, follow him in. He sees the unfired shot, understands that it could blow at any time, so he shouts out a warning. He grabs a fellow worker, another miner, by the shirt collar, yanks him away, but it's too late for Louis. The blast goes off and he's nearly killed. We know that he was permanently blinded in his left eye. He had a broken collarbone and broken ribs on his left side. And the Colorado Miner newspaper reported that he was mangled in a most cruel manner. He was carried back to Georgetown, again, 2 miles distant, on foot. There was an improvised litter of gunny sacks. So they put him in that litter, carry him to Georgetown, to the Sisters of St. Joseph, who are doing charity work. They take him in, and they feel he will not live through the night, but he survives miraculously and then begins to improve. And this is where he does his soul searching. He's laid up for months. He's living on the charity of the Catholic Church that he had issues with. So he is humbled. It's really a case of karma for him, and he takes notice. So while he's recovering, he's doing this soul searching and deep reflection, and he decides that he's going to start over one last time. That final reinvention in the West, and he decides to really go against his parents' wishes and become the innkeeper they did not want. This is where he finds his greatest success.
That's amazing. It seems like there were a lot of elements to that life-altering event for him. It brings him back to the Catholics. It brings him back to his roots. And, there's elements also about being accepted into the community and the fact that wasn't there money that was given to him because of his heroism as far as saving people in the mining accident?
Yes. And so the townspeople collected a reward amounting to $200 to $300, which in today's money would be maybe $5,000. And so he was recognized as a hero. He was rewarded for being a hero. And I think that gives him the confirmation he needs to follow through on this final reinvention. And so he's been humbled enough that he goes back to washing dishes. He was washing dishes in Paris when he was 19. So here he is, 31 years old, recovering from an accident. I would argue destitute, since he was living on the charity of the Catholic Church, which nursed him back to health, gave him a second chance. And he's willing to become that dishwasher again. He's willing to swallow his pride, start at the bottom, and go from there. And so what he ends up doing is he takes that reward money, and he had been employed by the Delmonico Bakery, and he begins leasing that bakery. And he turns it into a first-class French restaurant and hotel, begins calling it Hotel de Paris. This happens in 1875. And for the first 3 years that he's leasing the building, he sacrifices by living in the building, not renting a house or going to a boarding house. He's cutting his expenses by living in the storeroom, which was in the back corner of the kitchen. So he puts a mattress on a small bed. He owned a few books. He put a curtain around that corner for a little bit of privacy, and he lives that way for 3 years, stockpiling money that he's making by selling food and renting rooms. And in 3 years' time, he's able to then purchase the building occupied by the former Delmonico Bakery. That building was known as the Powers Building. And so he buys the Powers Building, where he's running the Hotel de Paris, and immediately expands it. He expands the dining room to seat more people. He builds a large commercial kitchen to make food for an expanding demand. And this is when the business really takes off. They're coming for his cooking.
What time period is this?
1878. So he comes with the reputation of being the best cook in the Colorado Territory. So he opens it as a known entity, a known commodity. He's known as a good cook. So he opens with an advantage there too, his name. Well, his assumed name. And then he follows through. This is the thing. He begins following through. He's not sticking with things for a year and then leaving them, a year, leaving them. That was the pattern before. Now he's sticking with things for long periods of time. So his patterns are changing, and he gets rewarded for that. So the first 3 years, he's using that reputation of the best cook to lead customers to him. He's following through, delivering a good experience and a good product. The demand makes it so he has to expand the dining room, so he expands. And then every several years, he's building additions onto the Powers Building in order to accommodate the demand for not only lodging, but dining.
And that, of course, that is, during the silver boom here in Georgetown, Colorado.
Yes.
So it's a good time to expand.
And the economy here arguably collapsed in 1893 with the repeal of the Sherman Silver Purchase Act. And surprisingly, he weathers that storm fairly well. Even though he was dependent on mining business, he was entertaining mining engineers from around the world who were being brought to Georgetown for their expertise. So there was a man from Great Britain, there was a man from Australia, both mining engineers that stayed at the hotel. So maybe people like that weren't coming anymore. But the advantage he has is location, the high country,
Mm-hmm.
and tourism because of the high country. People were coming for outdoors activities. Outdoor tourism is what we call it today. They were coming to hike and fish and camp and hunt. They were here to see the wildlife and the wildflowers. A lot of botanists were coming up. And there was still entertainment. People wanted to be entertained. So there were opera houses, there were saloons and dance halls. So his clientele may have been refined a little bit. Mining engineers were gone, but people were still coming up here to see the sights like they still do today. So in 1895, he was really, during this recession, arguably a depression locally, he's still investing money. He still has money to invest, and he's making improvements for when the tide turns and the economy recovers. What he was doing was framing artwork in 1895. He was a member of art appreciation groups. He would pay money for a subscription, and he would periodically get reproductions of famous paintings done as etchings and illustrations, and he would hand select what appealed to him, mat them, and frame them himself, and those still hang in the hotel to this day.
So he did it for the hotel?
Yes. Continue to invest. And that's another thing that he does as an entrepreneur. He makes a profit and then he invests it back into the business. Makes a profit, invests it back into the business. He keeps growing that business. I think something that is key to understanding Louis Dupuy, I don't think he ever escaped the threat of being identified and captured by the US Army for desertion. I think his mindset was always as a man on the run. And that is a mental man on the run. He's not physically moving around. Part of his plan is to stay as stationary as he can in Georgetown. He was here for 30 years. So he's not moving around, not nomadic at all. He stays planted here. So that's part of the disguise, is his permanence. But I think mentally, he was running. And this explains to me why he was so on the straight and narrow when it came to what I refer to as funny business at the hotel. He asks for people's possessions, their private possessions, to be put in a safe so that nothing is stolen from their rooms. He does all of the cash transactions on a shelf visible to his dining room patrons, so nobody can accuse him of stealing money or miscounting things. And so he really wants things on the up and up. And I think this could be extended to the health and sanitation concerns that he had when he was really hosting the public. And so his business is really two parts. It is a public dining room, and then it is high-end lodging. It's not equal parts. I wouldn't say right down the middle. I would say the focus was always on the food and drink at Hotel de Paris, and the lodging was an amenity. He was known for both. But I think that if there were any problems with an illness that would sweep through his customer base, that would maybe bring authorities to start asking questions. I think he wants to keep that threat at bay, as well as theft at bay and accusations of miscounting money at bay. So I think that's a consistent thing in his life. He walks a very straight line.
So let's talk about Louis Dupuy at one point in this article. So Kevin has written a blog post on his blog. It's called, the blog is called Odd Hostlery, Odd Host. But you wrote a article on, and it was published Wednesday, April 1st, 2020, which we are in the thick of the coronavirus. We're asked to stay home. We're asked to wear masks in public because this is such a contagious disease, which makes this a timely article. And so one of the things that you say in the article right away is that Louis Dupuy is recognized for his interest in sanitary science. How is he recognized? How do we know that?
Well, I really think it is exhibited through the built environment. So his reputation was first and foremost as a cook, second as a host, third as a debater, and then all of these put together are wrapped up in a nice little package by calling him the father of domestic science in America. Louis was a man of science. He first was a man of the cloth, but then he leaves his religion, becomes a man of science, and in fact was a big follower of Charles Darwin. And so he's very interested in health and sanitation, not only for its scientific aspects, but he's also responsible for guests coming from far-flung places. He had guests from Australia, from Hong Kong, from Constantinople, from England, the East Coast, the Midwest, from all over the world. And he's aware that there are epidemics, not too different from what we're experiencing right now. There were smallpox epidemics, dysentery, all kinds of things going on. And so he's really responsible for these people's well-being if they become a restaurant dining room guest or a lodger. And so what he does is he takes responsibility. He does an expansion of the hotel in 1881. He buys an adjoining lot, hires Chinese laborers to excavate a cellar, which gives him a coal room and a boiler room, and then they build a 2-story brick addition containing 6 rooms. This is the moment that he gets hot and cold running water and the ability to put in sanitary plumbing. So that comes in the form of a double sink for hand washing with soap and water, and a half bath or 2 half baths or powder rooms, one on the first floor and one on the second floor. The hand sinks on the first floor were for the dining room patrons. So he brings guests in, directs them to the sinks. They wash their hands with custom soap embossed with the name Hotel de Paris. They're using brass spigots that are nickel plated. They're drawing a sink of water. They're washing their hands. They're combing their hair, they're brushing their hair, checking their appearance in a mirror, and then they're drying their hands on a roller towel. And so we know that he's doing this because all those items still exist at the hotel. The problem is the practice with sanitary science. So he's interested in it. He's giving you the ability, the tools to be safe, to be clean, to be hygienic. But people are sharing the same cake of soap. There is a communal hairbrush, there's a communal comb, and there's a communal towel. So,
so they were missing the mark on some things, but he was,
which up until this current pandemic was laughable.
Right.
We talk about this hand washing on the tour, and when we explained that people no sooner were their hands clean, they were polluting them again on a shared towel, people would always chuckle. Now we understand we're not much better than that ourselves. We are passing germs back and forth by touching door handles, by touching our faces, by passing our credit card to a clerk at a store.
Okay, let's stop here for today, but be sure to listen next week for our third and final part of the Kevin Kuharic episode. Don't go away. Coming up next is our newly branded Kids Wisdom segment. And who's that behind you that I see in the camera there, laying on the ground?
My dog.
What's your dog's name?
Hoppers.
Hoppers. Hoppers must be pooped because he's not even getting up.
Like her real name is just Hops.
Finley is my great nephew. He's 6 years old, and today he's going to be telling us about his favorite history. Hops. Is Hoppers like a fun name that you call her sometimes? Him? I always get confused. Hops is a boy, right?
Yeah, no, silly. She's a girl.
God, Aunt Anne just forgets. Barley was a boy.
Yeah,
Okay.
you probably have to like write it down to remember.
You know, it's what happens when you get older, is it's hard to remember stuff.
Yeah,
I know.
it's hard to remember.
Do you have a favorite history that you like to know about or talk about?
Like presidents.
Oh, tell me about that. Who's your favorite president?
President Lincoln.
Why?
Because like we've been reading like there's this book called Jack and Annie, and like there's one with him, and like I love to learn about like new history and like President Lincoln's history and stuff.
What's the most important thing that you know about President Lincoln?
That he was a great president.
Yeah, he was. He was one of the best, huh?
Yep.
Do you know something that he did that in his presidency that he's known for?
He served the country. And did you actually know that he lives in a log cabin?
He did?
Yeah, and his mother actually died.
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
What else?
but then
I am learning all kinds of new things. That's why I like to talk about history to other people, because they can teach me new things.
and like this is a new thing. He got new family.
He got a new family.
And a new mother.
Oh,
Yeah, that's pretty much all I know about Lincoln.
that's what you know?
Yeah.
He also helped to end slavery. Did you know that?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know any other presidents?
Yeah, I like know a bunch. Like
Oh, can you tell me the ones you can remember? So, do you remember Barack Obama?
I totally remember. I remember the ones from this time, but like not like the history ones. Like
Yeah.
I only remember the ones from this time.
But you remembered Abraham Lincoln, and Abraham Lincoln was president in, over 150 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you know at least one really old president. But
Yeah.
so yeah, who is Barack Obama?
He's this president. He doesn't really seem like a president to me, but like he is one.
Why doesn't he seem like a president to you? What is it about him?
He does all this like stuff that like doesn't seem like a president.
So maybe I think what you're trying to say is that he just seems like a regular guy, like your dad, or like yeah, like so he does fun stuff and he's a funny guy.
Yeah, like he just like doesn't seem like a president.
In a good way.
Yeah, in a good way.
Yeah. I think he was my favorite president ever, was Barack Obama. I wish he was president now.
When I was a baby, I always called Barack Obama Brock.
Brock. That's what his wife calls him. Michelle.
Yeah.
Brock.
Yeah, Brock.
What was your favorite thing about Brock?
He kind of doesn't annoy me because presidents like the presidents kind of annoy kids.
Okay, that's good to know. What about who's the president now?
The worst president of all, Trump.
Why is he the worst president? A little secret. I want to tell you a little secret. I totally agree, but go ahead.
Because he always lies. He always lies about stuff.
Yeah.
He says he wants to open the world by Easter, but like he might, he like always lies, so I know he's not.
So if he says he's going to do something, then you just expect that the opposite thing is going to happen?
And he always does the opposite.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, is there anything that you want to share that we haven't talked about the coronavirus or history or anything that's on your mind?
I'm gonna think for a second. Do you have any more questions or thoughts?
What's the other thing that you have to do all the time because of coronavirus?
Wash your hands and stay safe. Yeah.
How do you wash your hands? How do you make sure you wash your hands really good?
I'm gonna kind of do it like if I was really washing my hands. So
Okay.
first, you get your hands wet, and then you take a squirt of soap, and then wash it off and scratch your palms with your thumbs.
Okay.
And then you dry.
How long do you do it for?
Like it depends on how dirty your hands are.
Okay, because I've been hearing that you should at least do it for 20 seconds. Have you heard that one?
Yeah, but like I recommend like as much as your hands are dirty and
At least 20 seconds. At least 20 seconds. Maybe more if they're really dirty, right?
Yeah.
And then you want to wipe the back of your hands?
Yeah, and this is something I also recommend to do is wash your hands 2 times.
Oh, okay. That's not a bad idea. And then what do you do after you get them all wiped, wash them really good? What do you do next?
You rinse them off or you dry them.
Rinse and then dry.
Yeah, rinse and then dry.
Okay, I gotcha. That's good to know. So there's a whole new thing we talked about. So we talked about Corona. We talked about all the different things, having to be home to be safe. We talked about your favorite history. Your favorite president was Abraham Lincoln.
Yep.
And we talked about Brock.
Yeah.
And how he's just a regular guy, and that's the thing you like the most about him. We talked about how you don't like our current president because you think he lies. I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's still one more topic that Finley and I discussed, but I'm going to save that for next week in the third and final part of the Kevin Kuharic interview. Just a reminder, be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and also check out our Patreon page. Thanks for joining us.